Oh, it's been that sort of a weekend, right? Well, it has been. Welcome along, ladies and gentlemen, to Pits to Podium and also on the Inside Line Formula One podcast. As always, this is myself, Soumil Arora, and I'm joined, as always, by Kunal Shah here with me. Kunal, before we get down to the very rather dull Spanish GP and all the learnings that we got from that one, we have to say that we're having a very, very exciting guest coming up on Pitch the Podium in the coming week as well. So, what's it all about?
Well, I can't give away much. I'm bound by a confidentiality agreement, okay? But, worry not, guys. It's going to be an off weekend for all of us, but we're going to make it a little fun by having a very, very well known F1 comic, F1 artist, a comic artist, and illustrator. Call him what you may, but, someone whose cartoons you have definitely enjoyed in the last several years.
Absolutely. We won't say the name yet again, but his work has just been stunning. And some of the insights that he has given to us while having a chat with us, stunning. So keep a very keen eye on that one. But let's actually come back to the very reason why we are here. It's our Spanish GP debrief. And yeah, say what you want. It was a rather dull race in many ways. The strategy influenced it just a tad bit too much. But Kunal, actually, on the whole, if we come to look at it, there were quite a few big learnings and big takeaways that we could take from this end of this triple header, pretty much.
Yeah, my biggest learning is what Max has, been saying all weekend, and that we need a softer compound of
We do.
tire,
We,
if we have to sort of try and even the competitive field. And guys, I'm saying this on a lighter note. At no point am I saying that we should make it easy for all the other teams to catch up on Mercedes. But, Sommel, yet another display where Mercedes proved that if all the conditions are, right, which they usually are, then they are unbeatable. And, Lewis Hamilton finishing like almost a pit stop ahead of even Valtteri Bottas. So it was a Hamilton masterclass in every way. He didn't get a Grand Slam or a Grand Slalom, as we say it in motorsport. But, he put a pole lap. He led every single lap of the race. And, what can I say? I think 156 podiums, as we know, 88th career win. And it's just, adding to the history books with every passing race of the 2021 Formula One season.
exactly. While we watch history being made, it may seem a bit dull, but let that sink in. 156 podiums, 88 race wins. He's just three behind the legendary Michael Schumacher. I remember my dad telling me in 2017 that, hey, this guy is actually going to beat Michael. And I just put him off saying, no, that's not going to happen. He's not going to go past Michael Schumacher. But here we are, almost on the cusp of greatness being achieved. It is truly stunning what Lewis Hamilton has done and what he will be doing very soon. But let's keep that aside because that's the thing we're usually taking for granted these days, that Lewis Hamilton coming up and delivering the goods and winning the race. But let's actually come to our Pits to Podium moment. Now, this is something we've been keeping on for the very length of this season, our favorite moment of this race. And what was it for you, Kunal? What was your P2P moment from this time Spanish GP?
You know, undoubtedly for me, it was Sergio Perez. I know that in the whole Pits to Podium team, there's been this debate
There
as
was.
to, which driver should it be. To me, it's Sergio Perez, purely because, he missed two races. As we know, he had the COVID-19 virus. He sort of made a comeback. He was ahead of Lance Stroll almost all the time through the weekend, apart from the first few
Yeah.
laps after the start. He delivered a classic Perez race, tire management, at its very best, and so on. But it's also tough to disagree with someone, and I know you are on the other side of the spectrum here.
Yeah.
All select Sebastian Vettel as also the driver with the Pits to Podium moment.
It is. As you may have already noticed, we have all gone with the proper Sebastian Vettel theme here today. It's our thumbnail, our title, everything. It's all about celebrating Sebastian Vettel finishing in P7. How the greats have fallen. It's a funny time to see him at such a low position, but all things considered about how Ferrari have been lately and how poor that relationship has been, seeing the four-time world champion even finish here was, personally for me, quite a big P2P moment. For quite a while, Sebastian Vettel was running in P5. And here's the crucial bit. he was actually running on a one-stop strategy, something that seemed very bizarre considering that Spain, a very abrasive circuit, lots of degradation, high temperatures, almost everybody opted for the two-stop. But as you mentioned, Gunal, Sergio Perez also on the one-stopper, for Sebastian Vettel also on the one-stopper, paid off in the end.
Absolutely. And, to me, Sebastian Vettel just finishing in the points is not just enough. The way in the manner in which he got there is what we're all celebrating. For yet another race, we saw Sebastian playing the role of the tire strategist, the race engineer, and so on. And, as we know, the entire transcript of the broadcast wasn't there on the world feed for all of us to see, but he was literally telling his engineer, and you guys should go and Google it and see. He was literally telling his engineer that, okay, here I am in the race. I want to run a one stopper. This is my time, and what is it that I need to
Yeah.
target as a lap time to try and finish the race on these tires. And he actually told his engineer, here's a task for you. And he did some maths, and I was amazed, we keep saying this in pretty much all our preview race videos, that we would love to see where Vettel and the Ferrari relationship goes. And, we are never proven wrong to see that Vettel is always trying to, direct Ferrari into in the right direction. But, it's, of course, we know how it's going to be panning out, a few races to the end. But, like I said, back to your question, P2P moment, it's equal to say Vettel and Sergio Perez.
Let's actually come to Sergio Perez a bit later on, and let's focus more on his teammate and what happened at the very start. Because Lance Stroll, the Canadian driver, the dive bomb of the day heading into turn one on the opening lap, that was stunning. Just went down the inside and had the sort of commitment to force his way through on the inside of a driver like Valtteri Bottas, who, if you're not Lewis Hamilton, isn't very docile, to say the least. He pushed Bottas wide, and Albon had to wait for quite a while as well because he had a lightning start and he just got caught out by the whole thing. But on the whole, Kunal, Bottas really struggled. We've seen it time and again in Formula One, and the start has just got too much power these days. So our Formula One starts becoming way too influential. And I mean, if you don't get it right over there, essentially that's your race ruined because Bottas in the end finished third.
It's a very interesting question. And frankly, there is a lot of emphasis on the start in 2020, even more so for a couple of reasons, which, I'm happy to share. First is, of course, knowing which Mercedes driver aces the start and leads into turn one and leads into lap one, because that driver effectively gets the more preferred tire strategy, as we know, right? And the second, of course, being that, given that tire strategies are pretty much the same, it's really important to make sure you do not lose positions at the start. So it's okay if you don't gain a place, okay, but losing positions, like you said, in the case of Valtteri Bottas, we've seen that, starts are getting that much more crucial this season. And, in the case of Valtteri, it's probably his third start out of six races that have sort of, that has been putting him on the back foot. And frankly, I haven't seen Valtteri's onboard camera from the start, but I don't think he made a bad start. I think he was just caught out by that 600-meter drag race, as we all know exists from the start line to the braking zone of turn one. And it was just that Max and every other driver just got a slipstream on him. And of course, not to mention that he was starting on the dirty side of the grid. So in all, Valtteri was just yet another, race of bad luck. And like he just said a few minutes before we recorded, that, the 2020 Spanish Grand Prix result could just mean an early sign of, his title chances slipping away for this season.
It could. It very well could. When you put up against someone like Lewis Hamilton, and this is something we've been discussing way too much in all of our previous videos, you can't let any opportunity slip by. And this P3 may surely feel a lot like a defeat for Valtteri Bottas in the end, because it just allows your main rival in Lewis Hamilton to go up ahead and establish his dominance. But Lance Stroll right there, that was, I think, the perfect audition for him to come up and say, hey, I'm not a bad driver at all. And in the end race result as well, Lance Stroll did quite a handy job finishing in P4. So maybe, even if Sebastian Vettel is to come into Racing Point, it doesn't quite show that Lance Stroll is a bad driver. Yes, granted, he has the last year's Mercedes to his advantage, but what he's been doing is he's been taking the fight to Sergio Perez. And even though Perez was clearly the standout driver in our case today, Stroll wasn't too bad.
Well, Stroll wasn't bad. I think he made a fantastic start, like we mentioned. When the start happened, and I almost saw that. Okay, what is the other Racing Point doing ahead? Frankly, that's how I saw it. But the at the end of the day, it was just he had a really good race. Okay, and it's important for him to keep having such races because like we keep saying that the Strolls are crazy if they're going to pick
Yeah.
Stroll over Perez in case Vettel is coming and so on. And he showed that he drove a very good race. But also hats off to Racing Point because they scored 22 points from the race, which helped them climb up one position in the constructors championship. So now they're third. And 22 points is what they scored. Also, interestingly, that was the amount of points that even Red Bull Racing ended up scoring this race. So it just goes to show how good a race it was for the Racing Point team. And in all, Lance Stroll is also, I think, fifth in the Drivers' Championship with 40 points and the like. So
Yeah.
I think good going and a great advertisement for himself. But again, strategy was split by the Racing Point team. So Lance was on the two stopper and Perez was on the one stopper and so on. So when you keep things in perspective, I still think Perez's comeback after a COVID-19 break was probably
Yeah.
more impressive.
It was mind blowing the way he came back. And even with that penalty, that 5-second penalty for impeding Lewis Hamilton on the exit of turn 6, he ended up finishing in P5, which is a brilliant result if you're coming back after a big exile like Sergio Perez has been. And just to slightly mention what happened, I think it was Perez and Danny Kvyat who got penalties for impeding Lewis Hamilton. That was a side affair, didn't really have a major impact on the final outcome of the race. That is certainly one thing that did happen. So, good weekend for Racing Point on the whole. And they were actually aided quite a bit by Charles Leclerc having that incident. Let's actually go down to it before we get down to what happened to the Red Bull Racing guys, because on the final chicane, right on the middle of it, Leclerc just seemed to lose power from his engine, and all of a sudden here he was stuck facing the wrong way around for what felt like an eternity. So, do you have any idea about what exactly happened? Because the commentators certainly seem to have a different idea about what went on with Leclerc's car.
First things first, when I saw a Ferrari facing the wrong way, the split second was like, oh my God, is that Sebastian Vettel
Oh,
yet again? And I don't think I'm the only one who had that reaction,
oh,
but I'm glad it
same,
wasn't.
same.
But I think it was just a freak case of the electronic control unit giving up on Charles's car. That's what, Matteo Binotto said after the race. His steering wheel display went off, and I think it just shut off the engine and so on. But his electronics were still sort of reset, and he managed to, revive the car, drive around. And then, as we were discussing just a few minutes before, somehow he managed to undo his seat belt. So that was also a strange way
Yeah,
of how his race just went from bad to worse. And then we saw, the Ferrari mechanics frantically trying to, get his seat belts fastened and, several things to try and get him back. But in all, it was just an unfortunate weekend for Charles. Otherwise, we would have again been saying that he had an Alonso-esque race,
yeah.
putting that Ferrari into places no one would have imagined.
Yeah, exactly. Leclerc has been so impressive this year. A shame to see this thing coming in and hampering his race, but again, what can we say? Sometimes lady luck just exactly isn't on your side. But for one person who didn't really have luck on his side, but who actually went in there and got everything that he could was Max Verstappen. We remember midway, I think not even midway, I think the first quarter of the race when he was on the soft tires, Red Bull seemingly made the call of keeping him out for too long. And Verstappen was furious. You could just hear it on the team radio. He was completely going at it at the team engineers. And that's a very good point that everyone picked up from the team radio. He said, why are we too focused on the Mercedes when we can actually focus on a road race instead. And that's what it did. And they ended up finishing in P2. So, what was your take on his strategy, Kunal? How do you think it played out for him? Because even though he stayed on the soft tires for far too long initially, and the tailwind coming in and ruining things for him, he was actually able to appear ahead of Bottas and keep that advantage in the final laps.
Frankly, he made it all work at the start. Like, he snuck in just before Lance Stroll snuck into Valtteri Bottas, and then he just kept going with Lewis. But, it was just one of those days where Verstappen had the second best car. So, instead of finishing third, which is, what could have been his highest finishing position, finishing second is something that, he would definitely, pat his back on. Talking about his strategy, I think, the reason why Red Bull left him out for that lap or two more is because had they pitted him earlier, they would have come out just behind or just between the two Racing Point cars, which would have been a bit of a struggle, trying to get him to sort of, go past them. So they just had to make a choice between, seeing the longer race and so on. And, about his radio, it just shows what 7 days, and how a different racing condition and package can do on a mental makeup of a driver. Like 7 days ago, we were laughing how he was talking of sanitizing hands and hydration. And then today, because he, of course, was really pushing and still unable to make a dent into Lewis's race, he was a little frustrated, understandably so, but all in all, like I said, he's still, second in the Drivers' Championship, which nobody would have imagined. And P2 is definitely one spot higher than, what Red Bull would have otherwise thought would have been an easy ask for them.
It is. And the interesting part, Kunal, Verstappen is actually in second place in the Drivers' Championship. So by no means is he having a bad year at all. On one side, you can say he'll be a bit frustrated not to challenge the likes of Lewis and Bottas on a more regular basis. But hey, he is second after a DNF in the first round as well. If that isn't a good example of what Max Verstappen is all about, I have no clue what else is. He has just been completely on fire. And when we look back at this season, we'll surely look back and say, wow, this man right here, he's done something that Alonso would do, along with Charles Leclerc, of course. But it's just like Fernando Alonso as well. It's been the teammate on the receiving end. Alex Albon, what just happened with that strategy? Came in, I think initially he pitted around lap, what was it? Let me think about it. It was lap 20 when he came in to replace his soft tires, and bizarrely they went early, of course, but they went for the hard tires. And I remembered hearing David Cross say early on before the start of the race that okay, the medium tires would be more advantageous, so to say. They would be 1 second faster than the harders, and the lifespan would be not exactly as short as you normally expect it to be in comparison to the hard compound tire. So that was the one to be. So as usual, Red Bull went for something different. And Albon stayed on the hard compounds for only 20 minutes. I somewhat don't get it. It's almost like you go and wear your swimming trunks before going to the water, only to take it off while you go in. It's a bit pointless. Why do something like that?
It's a puzzling strategy, to be very, very honest. He was the only driver to have used the hard compound. And more than just the hard compound, the timing of the pit stop was really bad because he literally came out of the pits and joined like the fag end of the train that was, the DRS train that was going, in the midfield battle. But, overall, I think his race was pretty decent because he made up positions in the end. The unfortunate thing was, he was just half a second ahead of Pierre Gasly. That was one. In the Drivers' Championship, he's less than half the points of Max Verstappen. Of course, we know Albon's had a couple of races where he was knocked out and so on. But the strange part is Albon has the same number of points in the Drivers' Championship as Lance Stroll. To me, that's the most shocking statistic that I read post-race,
It's strange. It really is. On one side, you expect Red Bull to be right up there, to be somewhat of the dark horses, the dark bulls, I should say, rather, and challenging Mercedes on the odd occasion. But to see how Albon has been languishing in comparison to Max is a bit sad. But it's good to see him picking up the momentum. Although the strategy didn't really play out in his hand today, I think it was good to see him give it his all and get to where he finished towards the end. But the key factor here, Kunal, is at right behind him, only half a second right behind him, as you mentioned early on, Pierre Gasly. What's it with Pierre Gasly? This man right here, he just needs a Red Bull car packaged as a Toro Rosso or an Alpha Tauri. Because this year, I think in specific the last three Grand Prix, Gasly has been probably one of the more entertaining and the more impressive drivers in the whole of the grid. What's happening for Pierre Gasly? What's gone right all of a sudden?
He's probably just feeling more comfortable at Alpha Tauri. He's under lesser pressure. He's probably dug deep to realize he doesn't need to keep proving anything to anyone. And the re-promotion to Red Bull Racing, if it were to come his way, will come only with great results. And it's fantastic to see him do what he's doing. And he's obviously putting a lot of pressure on the Red Bull management now by stringing these performances pretty much every weekend. And all in all, I'm sure in this break Red Bull would be sitting and wondering what to do with their driver lineup, and they were in the exact opposite situation this time last year. But so
Yeah.
it's not an alien situation for them to be in. But Gasly's really been, powering his gas mobile to
The
places where
gas mobile.
everyone is taking notice.
That's a good one. That's a very good one. And although Pierre Gasly may have only scored 2 points in the end, I think it was two very hard-earned points. And it just shows how Alpha Tauri, who seemed to be at the very bottom of the field in the first couple of races, have really picked up the flow and they are getting better by the race. We saw Danny Kvyat really holding off Sebastian Vettel at the top end of the race initially, and that was quite a good sight to see as a neutral to see AlphaTauri doing such a good job. But
Yeah, yeah.
another driver who came from this very academy and who just got stuck into that hole and has now moved to a very better team is Carlos Sainz, and he got P6. Now, Carlos Sainz said early on that this has been his worst ever start to a Formula One season. And I would actually disagree. He's at B9 right now. I mean, of course, you as a driver know things better than people on the outside. And rightfully so. It happens in every single sphere. But his result today on the alternate strategy as well, very impressive indeed.
Yeah, I mean, Carlos Sainz and Pierre Gasly both ran the soft, medium strategy. In all the the Red Bull Junior drivers have had a really good weekend. Also, home race for him, and he was out of the points in the last two races. And a lot of question marks keep being asked each time he doesn't score, because it's like, oh, have Ferrari made the right decision? And when Ferrari doesn't score, it's like, has Carlos made the right decision, and
Yeah.
so on, right? And it's crucial for Carlos Sainz to keep doing what he's doing, because Lando's of course had a podium this year, and he's I think 39 points, so just a point
Yeah.
away from fifth place in the drivers' championship. And with the package McLaren has, I'm sure they're pretty happy with at least one driver getting as close to the best of the rest positions, and so on. So in all, I'm sure he was pretty pleased with getting 8 points at his home Grand Prix.
Yeah, he would be. And that midfield battle really is coming to a very good end at this stage. I mean, we have Renault struggling a little bit today, Alpha Tauri gaining the pace, McLaren being consistent as usual, I beg your pardon, and then Racing Point doing what they have been doing from the very beginning. Again, interesting point. Another reprimand for the brake ducts today. So the formalities are going on. But let's actually bring it down to, I think, what would be a final point for today about the racing. And this has been something that's concerned me at least quite a bit. Now, you can't have good races everywhere, can you? In a circuit like Barcelona, it was very saddening for me to see a lot of people going on the internet and straight away dissing Barcelona as a circuit, saying it should be erased from the existence of the world and everything, all the sort of hot-blooded internet rage that you have. But no, I don't think so. It's a fantastic circuit. I mean, there's a world outside Formula One as well. They've got GT racing, motorcycles, prototypes, junior Formula, and Barcelona almost always delivers in a race for that. So, do you think fans should be going so hot in terms of dissing a circuit just because of one bad race? And it's not like Barcelona is the only circuit that's had a bad race, right? I mean, you look at Yas Marina or Sochi, to say the least. I mean, at least this is 10 times better than that one.
Yeah, I mean, there are times when Spa has delivered a bad race, and
Exactly.
Canada has delivered a bad race. And, today's race was actually an example that, just because there's a two-stopper race doesn't mean that it's going to be an interesting race. Because every
Indeed.
time we have one stop, everyone's like, we should make two stops mandatory, and we should get drivers to use every compound during the race and so on. Of course, everyone's trying their own ways to suggest how to make racing better. But the fact is that the current generation cars deliver a very efficient performance through and through, especially with circuits such as Barcelona. We also had a race where driver errors were absolutely at their very minimum. So, I don't think we should take off any circuit, given especially how big the Spanish Formula One market is.
Yeah.
It's just about now waiting and hoping that the 2022 cars, when they come, are more, offer a better spectacle, are better off, in wheel-to-wheel racing and so on. And we just have to hope in hell that all the races that come are at least of a significant degree of interest and entertainment. And if they're not, at least remembering that it's not that every time you cook a meal, it's the best meal that you've ever cooked.
Exactly. And you can't even take the circuit off, because where else do you go if you want to have a Spanish Grand Prix? Do you go to Jerez, or that's what they call it in Spanish? No, you can't. It's more of the same. Aragon, I don't think it has the requirements. Valencia, Ricardo Tormo, that's not some place where Formula One would want to go to for a GP. So what you essentially have is Barcelona, and you can't even take Spanish GP off because, hey, Carlos signs to Ferrari next year. Although they may be a struggling team, it's a blockbuster move. And Fernando Alonso coming back as well. So, yeah, it's a bit of an iffy thing, but I think we can have one dull race at times. So, Kunal, this actually brings me on to the final question that we have today. Is efficiency too boring? Because we see teams do thousands and thousands of laps over here, this very circuit in testing. And people say that drivers can drive over here almost blindfolded. So do you think things can be mixed up even more? And considering that we're going to have only one practice session for Imola that's coming up very, very shortly, do you think that's going to be the way to go in the long term? Just give teams less time to be more efficient in their operations.
Yeah, well, less time on track definitely helps, but let's not forget the fact that teams have several TB of simulation data, wind tunnel data. They're constantly reevaluating their setup models and so on. So efficiency, like I keep saying, and it's my favorite phrase, that when teams are efficient and races are efficient, they end up being boring. Okay.
Yeah.
But I hope to be proved wrong as 2022 nears. I would love to see how the Imola experiment works out, and with just one 90-minute session, how the teams do, and so on. But before we go, and since we mentioned Fernando Alonso, this was the first race this season that neither of the Renault cars actually ended up scoring points.
Yeah. They looked fine. I mean, there were issues of Esteban Ocon having some problems with his car lately, and then that bizarre free practice 3 crash. But yeah, so it's a bit of a tricky one for Renault to score points, because the last I remember, they were good in pre-season testing right here. I think they were quite handy.
Yeah. Good. Yeah, and Daniel Ricciardo just said that everyone else had a more consistent weekend and delivered a step with each session, and Renault struggled to do that. So sometimes that's what happens. I guess that's also what happened to Haas. After being quick in free practice, they just did not make a step forward in the sessions that mattered. But that's how it is in Formula One. You need to keep improving with every session as it goes.
Yeah, it has been a terrible weekend for them. But that aside, folks, it was a pleasure having you on for this show. Thank you so much for watching. Kunal, as always, I really enjoy and love doing these debriefs with you. If you enjoyed it, folks, and I'm sure you have, if you have reached this stage, please feel free to leave a like, to share this video with your fellow Formula One fans, because I know they'll be interested to know what the broader implications of this race will be. And also subscribe to Pits To Podium, and also to the Inside Line Formula One podcast. Thank you so much for watching, and we shall see you for that very special episode that we have been speaking about quite a bit. See you, folks. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Soumil. Bye-bye.